This fella Ronaldo is a cod.
Arsene Wenger's been in Japan for a year. They don't know anything about English football.
I will love it if we beat them.
This is football heritage.
Con Giovanni, incredible. Dribble.
If you don't know the answer to that question, then I think you are an ostrich.
After relatively comfortable wins this weekend, Liverpool and Manchester City now occupy the top two spots in the Premier League table. Despite Manchester City dropping 2 points at home last week, there's a feeling that both clubs have essentially picked up where they left off from last season. However, it is good to see the 3rd to 6th place teams have also picked up where they left off from last season by all fighting to ensure that they make it as difficult as possible for themselves to achieve top 4. Hello and welcome to the Total Football Podcast. I'm your host, Declan Harte, and joining me today is Andrew Conway.
Hello.
Andrew, why does no one want Champions League football?
They don't like the far trips away in midweek, you know, they want to...
But they're exotic.
Turkmenistan and...
Get to try all the nice cuisines and see the local,
They fly in on Tuesday night and they leave on Wednesday night. Yeah, I don't know if that's the best. If these kind of flying visits for Champions League teams are the best, you know, showing of the potential, the cultural potential of this various cities they visit in industrial Belgrade or. The hotbed of activity that is, Turin, maybe, if they have to play Juventus.
Well, I always remember the story of, I think it was Antonio Conte as Chelsea manager when they were in they must have been Champions League. They were playing some random country, the east side of Europe, and he was delivering a team talk or a tactical breakdown at 3 o'clock in the morning on a plane. So maybe Chelsea have decided enough is enough. The players don't want Champions League football because they don't want tactical briefings at 3 o'clock in the morning on a plane.
Yeah, it could be the reason. I don't think anyone's out there to try and lose matches, but certainly there does seem to be a weird trend this weekend with certainly with away teams becoming victorious in the most part, and most of the larger sides, with the exception of the top 2, losing out.
Yeah, it was what I think were Liverpool the only home team to actually win this weekend.
I think so, because Burnley and Wolves drew 1-1,
and that was a 97th minute equaliser for Wolves.
Yeah,
the home side. So it was weird. And Liverpool, of course, have an amazing home record, especially against Arsenal in recent years.
Yeah, and Klopp, I don't think has ever lost against Arsenal. As a Liverpool manager, yeah.
But I think Crystal Palace are the last side to go to Anfield and win, which was, I think, when Sam Allardyce was manager back in 2016, 2017, that season.
Yeah, I remember it fondly. I remember Sam Allardyce giving everyone a schooling afterwards about how he undermined. I remember who scored that day.
Christian Benteke scored against former club.
Was it that? Yeah, it might have been.
I only remember the actual result. I don't remember. I vaguely remember Philippe Coutinho scoring a goal.
Yeah,
but they still lost.
Philippe Coutinho. Wonder what happened to him.
Yeah, but then Arsenal, to be fair to themselves, they did improve on their last couple of performances at Anfield. They've regressed back to that time Alexis Sanchez was dropped in March 2016.
Yeah,
when they lost 3-1 at Anfield that time.
Yeah, they're getting
lost Arsenal.
Small improvements over time. They'll eventually get back to a 0-0 draw.
Yeah, like we talked about this match last week, talking about how there's a lot of goals in it, and over the years there have been a lot of goals in it, but it's been a lot of Liverpool goals.
Yeah, mostly one-sided, especially in some. I think the goal difference is ridiculous in the last 7-8 years. So Brendan Rodgers winning 5-0 and 5-1 and 3-1s here and 3-0, 4-0s, whatever they were, they're all mostly to Liverpool's favour in recent years. But you bring up an interesting topic, which was the manner of this defeat for Arsenal. As you said, it was an improvement. How if you've never listened or watched football before, you'd be like, oh, how is a 3-1 loss an improvement? Well,
Arsenal find a way.
Yeah, well, you could say that, but also there's been a lot of debate about this. But Gary Neville on Sky Sports commentary made a very interesting point about he was encouraged by Arsenal and their play, and the fact that they got a goal late on. It was just consolation. I think the 83rd or 84th minute by a substitute Lucas Torreira. But he was encouraging, said Arsenal will win away games this season like this. And there's a bit that would say to you, like, what is he talking about? This is absolute crap. Gary Neville doesn't know what he's talking about. Just because a team doesn't completely capitulate the way Arsenal have in previous seasons against Liverpool doesn't mean that playing that way, which was a very defensive manner, which didn't encourage much creativity, which didn't have fans to the edge of the seat. It was very much backs against the wall, defend at all costs, and Arsenal aren't a very good defensive side, so it was probably not the cleverest idea in the world. But the other side of that is they didn't give up. There was no petulant displays. Remember Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, was it right before he left to go to Liverpool, jumping up and down on the pitch when Arsenal were losing however many goals, because he didn't have the ball and he was getting angry about it.
Yeah, it is an interesting performance from Arsenal, just because as well, like it didn't seem like an Arsenal performance, which I think is kind of what you're alluding to. Like this, you talk about how like they capitulated not only to Liverpool, but like Bayern Munich was another one as well. Yeah. I remember Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain did kind of a similar thing when they lost 5-1 to them as well.
He did,
and obviously Alexis Sanchez was a big fan of putting on a strop, making it look like he was doing everything when they were losing heavily to teams.
But it was happening last season. If you remember, near the end of the season, where they kept shelling goals against so-called weaker sides like Crystal Palace or Brighton, or these teams were like, and were just like easily creating chances and scoring, and Arsenal had they would just put their hands in the air and like, oh, this is terrible, and not do anything about it. I didn't really see much of that, even though things weren't necessarily going their way. They had a penalty decision which was rightly given against them. They had a set piece goal, which is always a hard one to concede right before half time, considering how strong you played in defence the rest of the match. So they had things going not necessarily in their favour, and yet they didn't really throw a strop. I think the only booking they got was for David Luiz, which was for the penalty, which is probably a bit harsh when you think about it, a double punishment, even though it wasn't a red card. But the penalty was given. I'd say that was probably enough for a challenge that tame, but that kind of led to Liverpool's third goal when David Luiz couldn't take Mo Salah out of the match, which I think he was wanting to do while he was running at him.
Yeah, and like the one thing that I just thought about while I was watching this match is just like, I wonder how Arsenal fans feel about watching this match, because it's a very non-Wenger performance. Like, this is the first time now that since Emery's come in where it's really felt like this is the end of the Wenger era, because like Wenger would have much rather lost this match 5-0 and had 20% more possession or 15% more possession than Arsenal did. Like, he would have accepted a humiliating defeat as long as they played his way and they just lost to a better team on the day.
And that's
as opposed
something,
to this game plan that Emery devised.
And that's something that a lot of Arsenal fans will have to come to terms with, because Emery does not have a philosophy on football. He doesn't have this set ideologue way that, say, Arsene Wenger has, or Klopp has to an extent, or Pep Guardiola certainly has. He has a way which is, okay, what is the other team doing, and how can I set up to give my team the best chance in this match? It's a reactive style of football. It's not the most progressive style of football in the world, and it mightn't endear Emery in the long term, especially to like the likes of Edu, who's meant to be, how would you say it? He's meant to be safeguarding the values of the Arsenal Football Club now as director. Like, maybe in the long term, if this became a common thing, it wouldn't bode well for Emery. But in one-off games, it's something that Arsenal certainly have lacked in recent years. A way, Wenger very, very seldom did anything like that. I believe the last time Arsenal won an away game was the last time I can remember Wenger doing it. It was at Man City at the Etihad in like 2015.
I think that is the last time they lost away at a Big Six side, yeah.
Yeah, won away at a Big Six side. But that was a defensive performance that day, but since then it's never really resurfaced as a method. And maybe it's a sign that Emery's finally, he has no excuses anymore. Like last season, he had the excuse that it was his first year. There's a lot of players in the team that aren't his players, that aren't playing to the style they have. They're not used to his football, but he doesn't have that excuse anymore. He's been back in the transfer market. He's been given a considerable number of players, and he's cleared out a considerable number of players he doesn't fancy. So it's his team for the most extent at this point, and if they lose, they're going to lose on his name, not in Arsene Wenger's name anymore.
Yeah, and then Nicolas Pepe was the kind of big interesting figure I thought for Arsenal, because it was his first start for the club, and it was in a big game at Anfield. Like, it's always kind of a tough place to have your first start, especially because he is quite young. There's a lot of expectation on him because he costs so much. But I think he played well. Like, he probably should have scored that goal where he did really well to get around Tierney.
Did he not make him? Didn't he?
I think he just did the Iniesta shuffle.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember what
there was some
called.
good skill. There definitely was a nutmeg in that match at some point.
Yeah, Willock, I think, got a nutmeg on Tierney. Robertson at one point.
And I remember Firmino doing the chip up above.
Yeah, that was, I think, the interesting thing I thought for Liverpool. Firmino was, I think, their best player.
Yeah, well, this happens occasionally. Maybe it was Mane last season, but this season it was, not to go away to your Nicolas Pepe talk, I will come back to it, but last season the focus was all on Salah as a, must shut down Salah, so that gave Mane way more space, and he got 20 goals out of it in the Premier League. So maybe this season it's like, okay, now we have to keep Mane and Salah out of the game, which Arsenal tried to by keeping one of the tightest back fours I've ever seen, in that you basically had 4 centre halves playing. You had no one covering the wings at all, which gave Liverpool onus to send crosses in galore. But having that very tight 4 in midfield, in the box, effectively behind the midfield, marking Sané and Salah, kind of gave a bit of space in the pocket for Firmino to operate in, and he kind of used it to his best extent. He didn't have to drop too deep as a false 9 to get the ball a lot in the match, and he was kind of the free player, because Guendouzi and Joe Willock, I think, were covering the flanks, trying to put a stop to Liverpool's roaming midfielders in Jordan Henderson, and who was the other, Gigi Wijnaldum. But that gave Firmino the space then to kind of operate in there, do a bit of skill, have a few shots, create a few balls. He didn't get a goal in the end, and during the match Salah got 2 and Matip got 1, but he did look dangerous throughout.
Yeah, I thought it was his best performance for Liverpool in a while, which is positive for them. But I think just to kind of close on Arsenal, like that Pepe was a bright spark for them. That even though they lost 3-1, and as Emery says, he just doesn't want to play Liverpool. Yeah, Arsenal can still take positives from this. That Pepe got his first start, he played well, probably should have scored, or at least did very well to create a good chance for him. Almost scored a worldie then, even before that, when he curled it nearly in the top corner, just about missed it. So and nice that's creative energy there.
Supposedly he's at 60% fitness is what I've been hearing, and that really he should have come off at about 60 minutes, but Emery wanted to have the kind of, he wanted to see how the game was going before the third goal went in. But then when the third goal went in, it kind of effectively became a training match for Arsenal. He wanted to hold where they were and then let the Lacazette, Aubameyang and Pepe experiment loose. And it kind of did work. They did get a goal out of it, and they did create a bit more. But I think he was trying to get the minutes on the field to play with each other, try and get on the same wavelength. And they had a few minutes of that anyway.
Yeah, and then just to move on, then Manchester United lost to Crystal Palace, another one of the top 4 candidates, just putting in a dismal performance, really, against Palace.
Talk about a glorious few minutes. That was just... missing the penalty.
Which glorious few minutes, there's loads.
Yeah, early, it was a bad goal to concede, first of all, in the first half. Crystal Palace didn't really do a lot in that match. And
that I think was their first shot on goal in the match.
And it was such a tame, and this is the type of stuff that I talked about a lot last season. I know a lot of people disagree with me, but David De Gea, he doesn't necessarily have that concentration that maybe he was renowned for a long time, and maybe... listen to my point here on this one. Maybe it's a case that when Manchester United had a lot of the ball in that game, and at times, despite Mourinho's best efforts, they did have a lot of ball under Mourinho as well, because they were the larger side, going into a lot of these matches. And maybe it's a case that David De Gea, if he's not used to facing something, he needs to warm up or something. And because maybe at Spain, wasn't it the record at the last championship, the World Cup rather, that he only faced 3 shots against Portugal and conceded 3 goals.
Yeah, he faced 6 shots at the whole World Cup in total and conceded from 5 of those shots or something like that.
So that's what I mean, is maybe, maybe Manchester United should be taking a few, have a few crossbar challenges going before or something like that to warm him up a bit, because he can't, really that was his moment in the match. He didn't get a lot of criticism over it, but maybe that was, you have to be alive. It's like a striker. Centre forward gets one chance a match. A goalkeeper gets one chance to make a save at that level when you're playing an inferior side, the way Manchester United were. And he didn't stack up to it, and the ball went in very tamely in the end. Like, he badly placed, didn't make a huge effort to get to the ball, and like, he can blame the defenders for not getting back on the counter-attack, but like, that kind of stuff happens all the time, and it was a very tame shot from a player who probably shouldn't have been in that position, and they got a goal out of it. And it's not very encouraging for Manchester United, I think, in their kind of, if they're starting worrying about their goalkeeper like that.
Yeah, like I think to a certain extent he was kind of hung out to dry by the just terrible defensive nature of the team. But yeah, the second goal certainly should have done better. He should have been more alive to it.
But that's Man United's first team, like.
Yeah, pretty. Like there's not many areas in which I can think they can actually improve that starting 11 by using players that they have at their disposal. Like, obviously, if the transfer market was still open, they could. But
who would they get? Like, in the
chance.
back four, for instance? Like, I don't know who. They could sign another £80 million centre half. That's the only position I could see they could really upgrade in. They've spent a huge money on their right back, who was suspect for, not suspect, but kind of caught way up the field at a number of occasions against Crystal Palace. And I'd say a lot of bigger teams, or not even bigger teams, a lot of older teams are going to be watching that and like, oh, Wan-Bissaka likes running up the field and not tracking back as quickly as he likes running up. Maybe we should like play a few extra players on that side. Like, you can imagine this side playing Man City, and Pep loving to target that side of the field, let alone Luke Shaw's slow pace.
But it's hard to compare a Man United performance against Crystal Palace and then Man City, because they'll play totally differently against Manchester City, because that's actually the kind of side that they would rather play against, a side that's willing to have the ball, a side that is Man United are willing to let kind of attack them so they can go on the counter attack, because it seems like Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has only got the one idea that Manchester United are a counter attacking side, and you can't really counter attack against Crystal Palace when you've 80% of the ball.
Yeah, that's how I felt. That was what I was going to say, is that United don't have another way. They're going to play this way against Man City as well, and I know what you're saying, that Man City playing differently might help play into United's hands, but I don't know if City are that silly not to have that in mind the whole time and have someone back covering for those potential counterattacks. But we'll see when the season progresses, I suppose. The other thing
I think sorry to interrupt there, it's just the fact that the thing this performance for Manchester United is obviously we didn't talk about the Wolves match because it hadn't played by the time we did the show last week, but they did. Like, Wolves are another side where they're the side that looks to counter-attack on you, and Manchester United had a lot of the ball there, and they did play a lot better in that match, and they were probably unfortunate not to win that match, even despite the whole penalty fiasco that I'm going to try not to talk about.
Yes.
So I think I don't want to try overreact to this poor performance from Manchester United. Like, it was poor, there's no other word about it. But it'll be interesting to see how they react from this, because if I can't remember who they're playing next week. I think it's Southampton next Saturday. If they play similarly against Southampton and lose similarly to Southampton, then I think Manchester United have themselves another circus scenario where there's maybe a mini crisis going on at the club. But it could just be the case that this is just one of those matches. Crystal Palace, we mentioned they're the last side to win at Anfield. They're also the last side to win at the Emirates. They like a good performance against the big sides, even though this is the first time they've ever beaten Manchester United in the Premier League, oddly enough.
Yeah,
but I think it's how they play next week that we'll really learn more about this particular performance.
Yeah, like Zaha actually showed up, which he hasn't really done as much so far this season, and they're
his former club, of course.
Yeah, and a big side, which kind of helps with Zaha as well. I think when you find better performances against better, or maybe that's unfair to him, but in more pressurized situations, he tends to perform better than
Well, I think the game just opens up for him a little more when he's against the bigger sides, because they don't have that focus on him that maybe a Brighton or a West Ham might do.
Perhaps, but I think Palace were compact. They were a unit. They defended well throughout. I think that's Roy Hodgson through and through, and that's his style through and through. I don't think he's going to change at this point. And they were very fortunate on the counter attack. It's United that you have to look at, and you're like the way Palace were able to transition from defence to attack so quickly through nothing in the middle for United. Like there was no one covering for the full rampaging fullbacks from midfield. That is one area I don't think United really sorted out at all, in that kind of central midfield area, and that's definitely. Pogba, can take some of that blame, I suppose, because he is a player who doesn't like the art of defending as much as other players in his position. But it's not just his fault. Like, they have limited players who also are in there who aren't, like, not to rag on Scott McTominay, but he's not the best attacking player in the world, and he's not the best defensive player in the world.
Yeah, I think the failure to recruit in midfield is a total dereliction of duty by those in charge of signings at Manchester United, and I think that's where they will be hoisted by their own petard come the end of the season.
Yeah, well, like, and to talk about hoisted by their own petard, speaking about Southampton next week, they will be in a full blown crisis next week if they don't manage to do Southampton. Like, they do. Is the Champions League back the following week, or is that an international break?
International break, and then it's Europa League and Champions League is back.
Yeah, like that's a good time to search for a new manager. That international window, that gives them a week, an extra week to or 2 weeks really, to try and find another manager. But like,
I don't think we've seen Manchester United sacking any manager.
Well, that would be that would be the nuclear option. That would be the Frank de Boer type of sacking. But it's happened in the past, and I don't think things are going that badly, and there hasn't been that many murmurings. But if they start, if there will be, the way I would see it is if they don't, I think they will get a result against Southampton, because Southampton seem to have this weird habit recently of losing when you expect them to win and winning when you expect them to lose. So if it is looking more likely that they're playing okay, they're starting to get used to your man's methods as a manager, they'll go in and they'll lose 2-0 or 3-0 to this Manchester United side no matter what. So that's how I'd see that going. But if it was the other way around, I would think it would be like every match is suddenly a cup final for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, because the writing will be on the wall and the prophecy will be foretold, and he'll lose his job before the end of the season. Or even
but the end of the season is very far away as well. I think when it comes to Solskjaer getting sacked, if that is to happen this season, I think it will, unless they're in the relegation zone at Christmas. I think that could. And I'm not ruling that out either.
Well, I would rule that out, because there's a lot worse teams in this Manchester United team, even without him. Even with this dysfunctional, unbalanced midfield that they have, I still don't think they're bad enough. Well, maybe. Hang on. If Marcus Rashford was to get injured, and Anthony Martial has his usual drop in form, then they could really be in danger.
So I think Manchester United will be willing to just give Solskjaer till the end of the season if they'll just write it off, because really there's no point bringing another interim to essentially replace this interim.
Who would play up front for Manchester United if Rashford got injured and Martial was kind of just being meh? Who are the...
Martial is injured. He didn't finish the match against Crystal Palace. He went off injured.
Yeah, but if more long term, if you had a month, if you had Marcus Rashford pulling a hamstring and Anthony Martial doing whatever Anthony Martial does when he gets injured, what would be there is no one there is nobody there. Makeda, bring back Makeda.
Mason Greenwood came on in the second half against Manchester United, so I assume they just throw him in at the deep end, and I suppose James could
Mason Greenwood wouldn't even get into a championship. No offence to the guy, at the moment he would be a good loan signing for a lower half of the division championship team, who would get maybe 15-20 matches in that.
Yeah, but you could have said the same thing about Marcus Rashford as well before he made his breakthrough.
Well, I don't know if you would, because Marcus Rashford was pretty highly thought of even at that point.
No, see, that's the thing. Marcus Rashford wasn't actually that highly rated, especially in comparison to Mason Greenwood now, who's as highly rated as I can remember any youth player coming out of United in recent years.
So, you know more about this than me. I just remember there's a hype train, and then there's someone who's actually regarded as good. Maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe Mason Greenwood will be a 10 goal a season player by the end of this season, and Solskjaer will be vindicated, and he'll be manager for he'll get a big 6-year contract or something out of it.
26-year contract.
Yeah. I don't see it happening, and I don't see Mason Greenwood really. He may do it in the future, but I don't see it happening this season, and I would really be concerned, because could you imagine a Champions League, the draw of or not the Champions League, but the Europa League? The draw for the Europa League hasn't been made yet, but could you imagine a Europa League contest where they get a relatively big side in Europe somewhere? Who's in the Europa League that's a relatively big side?
There actually isn't that many teams.
Celtic.
Celtic is probably the biggest side.
I don't think they can't draw Arsenal at this point. But imagine who in Spain?
Roma.
Roma, yeah, going to Stadio Olimpico, and Roma's looking at they have who would they have? Mason Greenwood up front. There is nobody.
Marcus Rashford isn't injured, so there's no real point in actually. No, but
it's just there is a point because you always have to have contingencies. Like if you remember last season, a bunch of players got injured and were out for the season early on. That probably.
That's how Marcus Rashford got into the side. There was a bunch of injuries.
True.
And that was Louis van Gaal's whole thing, and it has been throughout his career is that he likes to keep his squad small, so that if there are injuries, he can play youth players. So I don't think that's really that big a deal.
My hypothetical mind is just going wild thinking about this. I would just love to see, just for the comedy value of having, because at that time it was fortunate for Manchester United because they only playing Helsingborg or Midtjylland, yeah. So it was a good opportunity for a young player. But if they ever got it, if they're playing Man City the next week or Liverpool or Roma,
they did play Arsenal that Sunday, and Marcus Rashford did score twice.
I know, but that was Arsenal.
A bit of a unique scenario. But I think we're getting into a bit too much of a hypothetical there. But what very much did happen this weekend was Tottenham lost 1-0 to Steve Bruce's Newcastle of all sides.
The mighty Steve Bruce.
They love a humiliating defeat to Newcastle to Tottenham.
They do, and they including Newcastle's star player getting injured in the first few minutes and having to come off, and them not being able to really play the game that even they set out to play at the beginning of it. And then Tottenham, with all the ball, with all the crosses, with all the shots they had, couldn't really trouble Dubrovnik that much. Not Dubrovnik,
Dubravka.
Dubrovnik's a place in Croatia. Couldn't trouble Dubravka that much. And then just a sucker punch of a goal on the counter, and it was a very well taken goal.
It was a nice pass by, I think it was Atsu as well, to Joel Linton, or however he pronounces his name.
Yes, I think it's something along those lines, and it was a good finish. And
yeah, definitely.
You couldn't complain by it. I know people were saying Davinson Sanchez can't defend, and it's something Pochettino's hidden for a long time. And I don't think it's that bad, because I think Sanchez he's a certain brand of defender that isn't the most flashy. He does his job very well, I think, and he's a hard guy to get around, and you don't want to play him. He's one of those type of players. He may not outshine a lot of other defenders, but if he's playing up against you and you're not feeling it that day as a centre forward, he is someone that'll definitely stop your game running. But he was the suspect for that goal. But then the rest of the game is just hilarious. Obviously VAR intervened for Spurs again, but it was more because I don't know if you know who the referee was for this match.
Yeah, it was Mike Dean, wasn't it? Main event Mike Dean.
Mike Dean absolutely unequivocally saying absolutely no to the Harry Kane penalty, with a big no and waving his arms. And apparently that was the reasoning behind VAR not giving the penalty as well. It was a subjective decision, and the ref on the pitch made the call, and the VAR will stay with the call of the ref on the pitch, which it was a weird weekend
for VAR as well, because there were a lot of high profile incidents where a penalty could have been given, but for some reason they just didn't.
Yeah.
So that was quite strange, because there was one in the Chelsea-Norwich match where I think it was Azpilicueta could have got a penalty. There was one or two incidents in the Manchester United match. There was this in the Tottenham match. There was an incident with David Silva in the Manchester City match. Coincidentally, all big sides, and then them all not getting the decision in their favour, when arguably they probably should have got the decision in their favour.
Yeah,
so
and this is something that
strange.
Serie A experienced as well. If you remember when they first brought in VAR, that all decisions seemed to go against the bigger sides, that they weren't getting the penalties they were getting in the past, or the penalties were given in against them that weren't given in the past. And that's kind of a positive or democratisation of the refereeing process, which you can hopefully we'll see now. Once penalties start being given at Old Trafford against Manchester United, that's when we'll see the real, is VAR actually working for the smaller guys. But it certainly is a bit of a sea change that when all these decisions aren't necessarily going to the big teams. And I'm still waiting to see the smoking gun for VAR, as in, people, there's a lot of hatred out there for VAR at the moment, and I still don't see, can you point to a decision or point to a time in a match or point to something that isn't, it's not ideal, it's not perfect, they're still working out the kinks, but I think it's towards, unless we do it now and suffer now with the kind of the stoppages in play or the weird questioning of judgment of referees, we won't get to a world where we'll have near automatic decision making happening and the rules being adhered to or not being adhered to or being managed as we want them to be. Like, people may be against that and they will always want the human element involved, but I for one would like to have like the rules to be governed as they are written in the book and for everyone to play on a supposedly even playing field.
Yeah, I think mostly my issue with VAR so far has just been that the rules themselves are just kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
And that, like, there's still that bit of human error. Like, you can give Mike Dean the extra camera angles, but Mike Dean can still make the wrong decision.
Yeah. And
I suppose you can't really fix that.
Yeah, until we remove the referee from the pitch, which is an inevitability, I think. We'll have some kind of flying fibre optic camera which will have better angles than the referee could ever get, and be less cold for the referee, so they can, make all the decisions correctly the first time. And
obviously, it's still only three weeks into the season. VAR we're still figuring out Stockley Park. Where is Stockley Park really?
Yeah,
like, that's the real question.
When will it be vandalised? Not that I'm condoning that at all, but something's going to happen to that place. I hope they have good security on it.
Yeah, sure. Did you see the story in Greece? Not to go on a random tangent here. Of they have VAR in Greece now, the Greek league, and one of the referees, they showed them accepting some fast food order from some kid. There's actual kebabs, kebabs,
being left funny in the door, and you could see it on the screen on the footage.
So that was pretty funny. Yeah. And then I think finally in the news we'll talk about Aston Villa coming back to the big time, getting their first win of the season.
Yeah.
Dean Smith, John Terry, captain, leader, legend, or whatever the mantra is about him. It was a good win for Villa at Villa Park against Everton, but Everton just, like, I was thinking about it when I was watching it. Like, they lost Lukaku 2 years ago now, 3 years ago.
Yeah, 3 years ago.
This is the third season without Romelu Lukaku now, who was getting 20 to 25 goals in the league a season for them, which was pretty impressive for a side like Everton, who traditionally would finish just outside the European places. Like, you wouldn't see many mid-table clubs having a striker score that many goals.
Yeah.
But they obviously got a great fee for him. They've decided to spend a load of money in the last few years, but they decided to replace this 20 to 25 goal a season striker with a bunch of 5 to 8 goal a season wingers.
Yeah. Mostly from Arsenal.
Yeah, like they got on the bench, Theo Walcott and Alex Iwobi were sitting beside each other. Then Moise Keane came on. Obviously, he's not at full fitness, so won't judge him really yet. But Alex Iwobi, he hit the post. He did all right. Theo Walcott missed an absolute sitter at 1-0. Richarlison didn't really do much to excite.
I forgot about him.
Like Gylfi Sigurdsson, who I guess is a number 10 and not a winger, but they spent a lot of money on him. He seems finished.
You said that, but he's double figures last season in goals and assists.
Yeah, it's just at Everton he's never been. He always seemed like he was better as a big fish in a small pond instead of like a medium fish in a medium pond.
Yeah, my view on this is it's Everton. It's new season, same old Everton. That they, no matter who's in charge, no matter how much money they throw at it or not throw at it, they seem to have the same trend every single season. This is even going way back into the David Moyes era, where they'll have a few weeks where they'll look great, and all the players say, "Oh, look how they've assembled this squad of has-beens and up-and-comers and local players, and look how well they've done for themselves." And then they'll go on a big mad losing streak, or just getting disappointing results, not winning when they're expected to, or losing when they're expected to, or drawn. And every year it's the same thing. It happened under Coleman, it happened under Roberto Martinez, it happened under Sam Allardyce, it's happened under Silva now, and I don't know why anyone is surprised. I think it's just something about the club. Like, maybe this is a terrible thing to say, but could you imagine a kind of Mike Ashley approach to Everton, where they would be? It is kind of, that is what's happening. They're hitting peak Mike Ashley without spending the money of Mike Ashley, or spending a lot more money than Mike Ashley.
I knew he would. He can't take it, can he? He can't take it. He just can't take it, because without tacticking him, without witting him, you know what I mean? He just can't cope, can he? So.
The Premier League season is only 3 games old, and already the likes of Arsenal, Manchester United, Chelsea and Tottenham could easily be ruled out of this year's title race. The first international break isn't even upon us yet. It's still only August, and here we are discussing a 2-horse title race between Liverpool and Manchester City. Both look unstoppable. Both are on long unbeaten runs. How are the teams supposed to stop these relentless machines? Can they be stopped?
Short answer is no. I think that I agree with your introduction. It is already a 2-horse race. I think maybe we had some outside thoughts at the beginning of the season. Maybe they're catchable, or maybe some of the transfer dealings that the other teams in the top 6 will kick them on a bit. Maybe Spurs will have a bit more juice in the tank. But going off the first 3 weeks and the way that City, even though they dropped points, continued on, and Liverpool as well, neither team looks like they're anywhere near the quality of any other teams in the league. Like they are a cut above at the moment. They just have, they're well-oiled machines, as you said. No one can come near them, and I think it'll be closer than last season, because last season was an anomaly for points totals. But I still think that they're a cut above the teams in 3rd to 6th place, certainly.
Yeah, like the only interesting thing of note I can think of to make it a little more positive for the teams below these two is the fact that neither of these sides have actually kept a clean sheet this season.
True. Like, it goes without saying, like I think I mentioned it last week, that Man City intentionally weakened themselves last season by letting Vincent Kompany go and not replacing him, and trying to sell out of Mendy, and being open to other defenders leaving the club as well, like Danilo, and I think there was maybe talk of John Stones even being available for the right money. But now they didn't sign anybody to replace any of these players. They look as suspect as they did last season when it comes to defending. Like, they still don't have I don't think I've completely lost the name of the left back he just played.
Zinchenko.
I do not think Zinchenko is a great left back, certainly on the defensive side. I'm not even sure about him as an offensive player either. So they did weaken themselves, and Liverpool always had a smaller squad, always had more limited quality, and if something were to happen to Virgil van Dijk, they would suffer tremendously. And even Virgil van Dijk, as Pepe showed against them on Saturday, isn't unstoppable as a defensive machine.
Yeah, obviously Liverpool have had the injury to Alisson as well, which is probably they would have probably kept a clean sheet against Southampton, but for Adrian's cataclysmic mistake there in goal. And
Man City still have Ederson, who was a liability when it comes to shot stopping.
Yeah, that was really evident against Tottenham. I still think that Lamela goal was just kind of embarrassing, really. For him.
Was, yeah, absolutely. And he easily could have been sent off against Bournemouth. When I think a ball was played long down the line, and
Callum Wilson, I think. And he just took out Callum Wilson with a waist-high kick, which when I watched it I thought, yellow card seems right, but then when you actually think about it, if a defender did that was probably a red card.
If any other player on the pitch, this isn't one of those things, it's because it was outside the box. It was no, if that had happened in the centre circle in the middle of a match, that's a red card most likely. You can't put the foot that high, but they're both going at quite some velocity. That'd be a sin-binning offence in rugby.
Yeah, I imagine Callum Wilson was pretty sore afterwards. And then
Ederson just walked away.
And the yellow card didn't really do anything to help Bournemouth. They got the free kick, but it didn't lead to anything as good as Bournemouth are actually on set pieces, and they did eventually score from a free kick. But the angle was too tight for them to take a shot, so they just had to take a cross, and that's really no good to them in the end. Ederson gets away with it really, because he's not going to pick up a second yellow.
Yeah, and I thought that was. I'd say if the ref hadn't made such a quick call on that, he immediately pulled out the yellow card. I think that's something VAR maybe would have looked at. But again, going back to the Mike Dean discussion, that VAR is not going to overrule a referee on the pitch decision unless they really have to, and that might be a flaw in the system already. But yeah, defensively, neither team is perfect. But one thing I want to bring up, and this is kind of what I want to talk about with you, was at the weekend both Man City and Liverpool won, but they played against teams who played very differently against them. Liverpool, Man City, they're not identical sides, but they do have a certain way about them. They like to play fluid attacking football with a lot of possession, with a lot of pressing, and a lot of winning the ball back early. So against Bournemouth, Man City did this, and they played some electrifying football at times, but it didn't really get through a lot of Bournemouth defending because they're very dogged, and then they had a bit to worry about themselves on the break because Bournemouth were attacking them whenever they got the ball. They would go straight forward, making nice little short interchangeable passes, playing the ball into space when they had to, like that Callum Wilson incident we spoke about there. And getting the ball upfield to their players and moving the whole team as a compact unit to try and utilise the pitch that they have there in Bournemouth. And it gave Man City problems. They got in behind their defenders, and they were picking at Zinchenko and Kyle Walker, probably the two weakest links in that Man City team, and certainly on the defensive side of things. And it was working, and it did create them chances in the match. Not that they were very clear cut or huge, goal scoring opportunities, but they were there for Bournemouth against Man City. And it's an interesting approach, and it was just very interesting, I thought, to contrast that to what Arsenal did against Liverpool. Liverpool again, that fluid attacking structure, they play with width, they play with a lot of creativity, they want to hold the ball a lot, so Arsenal let them have the ball, and they played everyone behind the ball except for two outliers in Aubameyang and Nicola Pepe, who were very fast players, and they just kind of played long balls over the top for them to chase after whenever they got the ball, similar to what Ole Gunnar Solskjaer did against Spurs last season when United won. It was a very similar kind of game plan where everyone's behind the ball and let's hope for the best, and it was like a very negative and regressive style of football, but to a large extent, bar a mistake at a set play and a silly enough penalty to give away, it worked for Arsenal in that match. I was wondering, what do you think, which if you were managing a team playing Man City or Liverpool next weekend, which approach would you take and why?
See, what's interesting there is I think there's an obvious and a very good contrast between how Bournemouth and Arsenal played, but there is one thing that they both had in common, is that they both created two or three, well maybe not three, but like one to three outstanding chances for themselves where they really could have threatened them, especially when the score was still 0-0 or 1-0, and they didn't take them. So they both lacked that clinical edge. And it feels like you need to be as clinical as possible, which is very difficult in football if you're going to take down one of these two teams. And that's why I feel like neither approach is preferable over the other, really. Not to bring up Antonio Conte again, even though he's at Inter Milan now, but there's a good contrast between how him and Sarri did against Manchester City, because I think it was the year Man City won their first league title with Guardiola that Chelsea went to City late enough in the season when it was clear City had already won it, and Chelsea just sat back, didn't even try to score a goal, and then just accepted a 1-0 defeat. And then obviously you could forget Sarri losing 6-0 at the Etihad last season. Yeah. And but after the first game with Conte basically said something along the lines of, "There's no real point in going out trying to attack because you just lose 4 or 5-0. So we'd rather lose only 1-0." But really, what is the difference in losing 1-0 and 6-0? You're 0 points either way. Goal difference isn't that important that you really need to keep an eye on, especially when you're Chelsea, because goal difference has only really come into play twice that I can remember in the last 10 years. Very
seldom does it come. It didn't matter that it kind of mattered last season, but it didn't matter certainly the Conte season.
Yeah, so it is interesting because City can put up a cricket score against any of these teams, if they really wanted to. I remember them, they beat Stoke 7-2, then they beat Watford 6-0. This is a couple of years ago, and they weren't even as good as they are now. And a lot of these Premier League teams have improved, but they beat West Ham 5-0 recently, and we talked about how good West Ham look and how offensive they look, so that means Man City did keep a clean sheet. I just realised that. Oh. So I can always rely on West Ham to ruin my stats. And that was the first. It was against West Ham, so barely even counts. Yeah. So we talk about these Premier League sides improving, but Man City and Liverpool are improving at an even greater speed. So trying to figure out what way to beat them is difficult. I think it was Klopp actually that talked about how to beat City when Liverpool weren't quite as good as they are now, and City were clearly better than everyone else. Klopp said, no, the way to go out there is to go out and actually attack them and press them high up the pitch and get the ball early and make sure that they don't, to suffocate them essentially. Yeah. Off the ball. And Liverpool were the Achilles heel for Man City, and it'll be interesting to see do they kind of remain that this season after not beating them last year and that being the difference between the two sides. We talked about this before we went on air of how there's actually not been that many seasons in which it's a clear 2-horse race. Like, there's been a few 3-horse races and more, but it's more interesting, I think, when it's just 2, because it makes it amplifies the matches between those two sides.
Yeah.
And was kind of the edge that we missed from last season by the fact they had already played each other twice by January. Yeah. I don't know when they meet for the second time now, but I
doubt Sky are going to make the same mistake with their fixture.
Yeah, because I think the Manchester Derby was late enough. They must have thought Mourinho, Pep was going to be the storyline again or something.
Yeah.
Or maybe the computer generator is totally random.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. So it'll when it's 2 horse, like the last time it was just a pure 2-horse race, obviously excluding last season, was probably the last not even the last Ferguson season, the year before, the Aguero.
Aguero, when it was 2 teams, but there was other teams involved in that right to the end as well, if I remember.
Not really. Like Chelsea
for a
had
lot
Benitez.
Of the season. If there's teams in it till March, April, I
don't think there was really. Like at that point, Benitez was kind of just stemming the tide at Chelsea and keeping them ticking. I don't think they were really in the title race. Because you could go to the 13-14 season where it was Liverpool and Man City again, but again Chelsea were there enough that the match at Anfield where they won 2-0 like that, they were still in the title race at that point. Like I think that put them second in the league at that stage, or close to it.
Yeah,
if not first.
I suppose you were going back, and it was like we used to be used to this. This used to be the norm that we had Man United or Arsenal or for a good 10 years. Sorry.
Man United and X essentially there through the 90s, like.
Yeah, effectively, yeah, because there was Man United against Norwich or Aston Villa, there was Man United against Blackburn, Man United against Newcastle, Man United against Arsenal, Man United against Chelsea then at the very end of that kind of era. But yeah, it's been such a long time, we'll have to get used to this again. Like last season was kind of our tester for it because Tottenham were in the race for a long time, but this season you're like, okay, realistically there's only 2 teams that could possibly win this, and they are Man City and Liverpool, and what teams can do to disrupt that. You're kind of like, what's going to happen is what we were expecting to happen at the end of last season, where whenever Man City or Liverpool would drop points, it would be news, and that's the way it used to be for Man United, say.
Because Liverpool are actually 12 games in a row now that they've won in the league if you include last season, which is the first time they've ever done that in the Premier League, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Like this really is the best Liverpool side we've seen since, the last time they won the league.
Since the good old days,
really.
Yeah,
since Dalglish was in charge. So it's so funny to think back last season that they got 97 points. Like they lost one game all season. Like it really, morally, we shouldn't really want Manchester City to win this league because, in just a pure footballing sense, they've won it twice in a row now. They won everything last season, and football needs that bit of variety. But then also just off the pitch, the whole way the club is run and everything. Like Man City has talked about, or Pep Guardiola rather has talked about how Manchester City are kind of the press is against them.
Yeah,
and it is in a sense they should be, and it should be the Liverpool should be the people's champion, the Rock kind of they're the Rock.
In wrestling,
Vince McMahon is Pep Guardiola.
Exactly, and that's inevitable. That's what comes with success. You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain, and that is what happens. That's what happened with Manchester United. What's happened back to Liverpool back in the day. It's what's happening to Man City as we speak. Chelsea have experienced it. A lot of teams who have success are hated, and hated for good reason, because they ruin everything. Like Michael Schumacher famously was one of the most hated persons in Formula 1 because he kept winning. And same went for Ferrari at the time, and now that has passed over to Mercedes in motorsport because they keep winning, and it's fair enough. There must be some kind of variety. It's easy for everyone to unite behind something they don't like, and I don't think Man City have yet hit that pinnacle because they were without success for so long, because they're not one of the traditional teams, because they aren't doing it in a fashion that, say, the way Chelsea did it was so obscene that they kept breaking records, kept signing everyone else's best players, and then had a very dour manager who played very negative football and kind of rubbed it in your face when he beat them. Pep isn't really like that, and City aren't really like that. They've gone about it in a slow, very calculated way to avoid people hating them. But it's inevitable. I think if they win the league this season, that'll be 3 in a row. And only really great teams have won the league 3 in a row. And is a City team qualified for that? They'll have to if they win it for the third time, and then I think they'll really be hated as a team.
It kind of adds a dynamic, I think, to this particular rivalry, because there's been some pretty good rivalries over the course of the Premier League era. Like the Arsenal Man United one is probably the pinnacle, Wenger against Ferguson. But like you mentioned a few of them there before, like Kevin Keegan against Ferguson as well was quite entertaining. Mourinho Ferguson was quite good. Even Ferguson Benitez. A lot of these involve Ferguson. Yeah. When you think about it, but even then,
success was at United at the time. Success was at United at the time. So.
Yeah, that was just the way it was. But even in the post-Ferguson era, like there was Rodgers, Pellegrini for a year or two there. Ranieri, Pochettino for a year.
Yeah, I don't think you can really call those rivalries in the classical sense.
Tamer. So it'll be interesting as well just to see how this rivalry goes down in the Pantheon, because like the thing with Ferguson against Wenger is they both won the league at that time. Like they both got one over the other. Dalglish got one over Ferguson. Mourinho got one over United as well, and then ultimately Ferguson got one over Mourinho. Then back again at him. Yeah. But Klopp and Liverpool, they haven't really got, like, they beat them in the Champions League. They have that Champions League trophy now. But in terms of the Premier League, they'll have lost the league last season, or they did lose the league last season only by a point. But if they lose again this year and City win 3 in a row, and then maybe even Pep leaves, like it'll feel like a bit anticlimactic, I suppose. And like Liverpool deserve credit for being able to put up this much of a fight when no one else seemingly can. They're a very well run club. They've made very good signings, because it is hard to compete with a club like Man City that just are backed by a state essentially and can spend whatever money they want and feel like they can break whatever rules they can. According to the football leaks anyway, they feel like they can break the rules and get away with it. So, credit to Liverpool for being able to put up a fight. And I hope that this title race does run as close as it did last season, and that one of them doesn't just fall away, particularly Liverpool, because it would be a shame that we all just end up with another one-horse title race, because
those are the worst, to be honest.
They are the worst.
Even if you have great teams doing it, it's kind of like Chelsea, I believe, did in 2005, and
even City 2 years ago.
Yeah, they kind of did it. They've kind of done it 3 times the last 12 or so years. Or 13, 15 years, where they kind of just cut themselves off from everybody else and then just kind of rode their luck to the... And you don't really want to coast to a league title win, even if you're the club that wins it, because then you kind of feel a bit like, oh, this really wasn't a real title race. Because even look at Germany sometimes, like you see Bayern winning league titles without really trying, and it's like it kind of devalues the whole title.
You kind of wonder where the joy is with a Bayern Munich Premier League or with a Bundesliga win sometimes, when they just can't do it to a canter.
Yeah, and it's kind of takes everything out of the drama, like you said, the joy, the celebration. You have to learn you have to experience woe and pain before you can experience joy. And it's something that a one-horse title race kind of takes away from you. You have to have the risk of losing it before you can really enjoy winning it.
Well, yeah, like all great stories have that moment where the protagonist faces a challenge.
Yes.
Or has to overcome the odds in some manner.
And that is something that hopefully Man City can face this season if they do go on at a canter and win a third league title.
We're still fighting for this title, and he's got to go to Middlesbrough and get something.
Well, we spoke earlier about positives for Arsenal after losing 3-1 to Liverpool, and I think a real positive for them is that they've got a pretty handy fixture next week against Tottenham.
Yes, Spurs away from home. It's not the... It seems easy to go there now, isn't it? Newcastle kind of showing the way.
Well, is it on in New White Hart Lane, or is it on in the Emirates?
Yeah, New White Hart Lane, Arsenal's first visit.
Oh, I thought it was on the Emirates.
No, New White Hart Lane. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. It's a nice stadium, it looks very much like a US stadium, which is very kind of compartmentalised, a lot more than you're used to in kind of English football, which is designed more around standing and terraces, and this very much isn't.
Sorry to interrupt there, but it is on in the Emirates.
Oh, is it?
So we don't need to talk about
that all wrong.
Season or stadium just yet.
Oh, well.
But what's interesting is the fact that this was probably the game of the season last year, the North London Derby at the Emirates.
Yeah, was it 4-2 last season?
I think it was 4-2 to Arsenal. Yeah, I think Lucas Torreira scored his first goal for the club. It was pretty much the winner. Arsenal took the lead, then Tottenham took the lead, then Arsenal took the lead. Lacazette scored a really good goal in the second half.
Yeah.
Ramsey, I think, played quite well.
Yeah, the Arsenal, I believe, played a diamond through. They played it through like a 3-5-2 diamond, and it was a 3-5-2 diamond, and they played a diamond against Liverpool. But I don't see them playing the same way they played against Liverpool against Spurs for some reason. I'd say they have to be using Unai Emery's parlance. They have to be the protagonists in the match and really go for it. And this will probably see our first glimpse at that kind of trio up front starting a match of Lacazette, Aubameyang and Nicola Pepe.
Yeah,
which will be very exciting.
That was kind of the disappointing thing for me with the Arsenal-Liverpool match, is that Lacazette didn't play. I thought he should have played instead of Aubameyang, because Aubameyang tends to not play as well against the bigger sides. And I think Lacazette still offers that pace that I think Emery was looking for.
He just isn't as fast. So
I suppose the link-up play between them will be fun to watch, because I've always found that to be one of the best part of Lacazette's game, is like when he's able to actually link up well with the other strikers. It can really bring the best out of him and the team as a result. So it'll be fun to see that against Jan Vertonghenless Tottenham backline. Tottenham just seem like a mess at the moment, really, like behind the scenes.
Well, like, they haven't really solved that whole right-back situation after getting rid of Trippier.
Yeah, Kyle Walker-Peters has been playing, but
I don't know if that's solved yet. He's still young, he's still raw, he's still subject to making those mistakes that players do, but he's no escape. There's no one to come in for cover for him, and that he will be up against either Aubameyang or Pepe, and it's not an easy task for a young player. But on the bonus side for him, it looks like Nacho Monreal is going to be sold to Real Sociedad before the end of the week. So, but
will we get to see Kieran Tierney at last?
No, he's not even going to come back to training until full training until after the international break, as far as I know.
Right,
he's nowhere near playing.
Signing an injured player, I suppose that's what Arsenal do.
It is what Arsenal do.
Kallstrom, who could forget?
Yeah, he had a broken back.
Yeah, just still past the medical though, or they just didn't do the medical.
But we might see Mesut Ozil for the first time this season, and that's like a new signing.
Oh yeah, that'll be fun. I was enjoying a bit of.
He didn't even travel to Liverpool during the weekend. Didn't even bother going up. He was fit. Didn't bother.
But Arsenal over Tottenham, even in recent years, like despite excluding last season, like they've put on some classic matches in recent years.
Yeah,
like
they're generally exciting. They're generally close. There's a lot of topsy-turvy-isms. Harry Kane generally scores a goal or two in every match.
Would you say that the North London derby at this point is the best derby in English football?
For sheer entertainment, I think it is. Yeah, because you can say Liverpool and United's almost always a terrible match that's full of tension and players don't perform to where they are, and it doesn't really go with. Doesn't really go with form. It's kind of a one-off match that inevitably ends up as a draw these days.
Those teams are rarely kind of at their peaks at the same time either, which is just a weird caveat of their
coincidence,
season, weird trend of their history.
And then the other big derby that's kind of in play at the moment is the Man City, Man United, Manchester derby, and again, you do get some good drama in those matches. Like Man United winning and Ashley Young not getting a red card and a penalty given against them. But so those matches are interesting, but they don't have the same pizzazz. They don't have the same rivalry, the intense hatred that kind of exists between teams that are so close together in Spurs and Arsenal. And it is bragging rights. And it is, as opposed to other derbies further down the league, it kind of has a bit more importance to it because the teams are generally battling it out at the business end of the table.
And, of course, as well as just sheer entertainment factor, handbags is also an important aspect of any rivalry. And we got a bit of that last year. I think Aaron Ramsey started a fight after Eric Dyer scored.
Yeah, I think he was, not happy with the celebration.
Hopefully we get a bit of entertainment and a bit of handbags next week.
Yeah, exactly. And there is some fierce competitors that will likely be playing. Like Kolasinac, you don't want to get in a fight with him. Granit Xhaka loves a bit of a dust up as well. So those players against Spurs, in Ndombele now doesn't look like he's a guy that wants to be messed with. So we'll see how quick the new players that come into both sides will adapt.
Yeah,
to
both sides
intensity.
Have brought in enough players that there is that extra added element, and especially because it's so early in the season. Yeah, that will be fun to look out for as well. So,
but who do you think is going to actually win that match?
It's hard to say. It's obviously it's the coward's option to say it'll be a draw, but I think I'd lean towards Arsenal.
Well, I think this is the first time in several years that Arsenal probably be the favourites going into this match, because Spurs have continued where they left off the end of last season, which bar the fact that they were in the Champions League final, isn't a very good place. They've kind of coasted through a couple of matches and then been found out in a couple of matches as well as a team that isn't that creative and lacks some incision from good players that are generally on the bench these days, which is a problem for the personnel manager at Tottenham Hotspur. And Arsenal are in form despite losing to Liverpool 3-1. They put out the bravest display they've had against Liverpool in several years, which again is saying something. And they have these new exciting attacking players, and as I said, a returning Mesut Ozil that could maybe lock together in some glorious, beautiful footballing trident and score some goals, or more than likely just be completely useless and lose in a 1-0 dour defeat in the rain.
Yeah, of course, the cliche with derbies is it always goes, the form book goes out the window.
It does.
So we'll see if that cliche can live up to its billing next week.
Hugo Lloris with a bicycle kick in the 95th minute.
Oh God, I can picture it now. How glorious!
I can really picture it.
That would
accidentally handballing it and far ruling it out.
That's at that point we just end football. Like it doesn't get any better than that. A goalkeeper scoring a bicycle kick in a last minute winner for a derby match.
Yeah,
that'd be so good. But yeah, there's a few other games on next week, so a pretty tasty looking weekend and full. I think it's the first time this season that we're going to get all 6 3:00 kickoffs on a Saturday, which is considered a full set of fixtures there. So no Monday Night Football, no Friday Night Football. It's a regular old, just regularly scheduled week. We don't get those often.
No, but we will start getting them now with European football returning, and so.
Yeah, and obviously they don't do Monday Night Football because we've got an international break coming up as well.
Yeah.
To look forward to. But fortunately, we've got some club football before we get into the swing of things there. And hopefully we've got a lot of goals to look forward to this weekend for us to talk about next week.
And the Champions League draw.
Yeah, we'll have a Champions League draw and I suppose the Europa League draw if it's interesting enough to talk about.
Probably won't.
Yeah, we'll see. When was the last time the Europa League draw was particularly interesting? Besides like the semi-final one. Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a while, yeah.
So anyway, thank you for being here, Andrew.
Thank you for having me, Dan.
And thank you for listening. We'll be back next week. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, then don't forget you can tell family and friends about the show. Spread the word of the Total Football Takeover. You can also follow us on social media at the TF Pod on Twitter and Total Football Pod on Instagram. We can also be found on podcast services including Spotify by searching Total Football Podcast. The more the merrier. That's what we always say.